Hey class, today we're going to look at adding rational numbers. So by the end of this lesson, you will be able to add rational numbers. Remember, rational numbers is any positive or negative number that can be written as a fraction. So first, let's look at the steps to adding rational numbers with the same sign. So remember those integer rules? When we add with the same sign, we're going to follow those same rules. So first, you're going to add the absolute value of the numbers. So you're going to treat them both as positive, right? So you add the numbers. Step 2, you're going to keep the sign that they have in common for the sum. And then step 3, simplify if necessary. So if you were dealing with fractions and mixed numbers, make sure you simplify your final answer. All right, so let's look at some examples for adding rational numbers with the same sign. So remember, when we have the same sign, we're going to add and then keep the sign. So we have negative 2.5 plus negative 4.5. They're both a negative, so my answer will be negative. And I need to add the numbers, so we're finding a total loss. So 2.5 plus 4.5 is 7. So our final answer is negative 7. If you need to, write your decimals up and down and line up your decimals. 5 plus 5 gives us that 10, and then we have 4 plus 2 is 6, plus the 1 is 7. All right. Number 2, we have negative 1.5 plus negative 1 1/8. It's a negative plus a negative. The signs are the same, so I'm going to add and keep the sign. So my answer will be negative, and I'm going to add my numbers. So 1 1/2 plus 1 1/8. I need a common denominator, so 2 and 8 have 8 in common, so I'm going to make my denominator 8. So 8 times 1 is 8, so then 1 times 1 is 1, so that stays 1/8. To get from 2 to 8, I need to multiply by 4. So whatever I do to the denominator, I'm going to do to the numerator to keep it an equal or equivalent fraction. So 1 times 4 is 4. So all I did was rewrite my fractions so that they had a common denominator. And now I'm going to add. So 4/8 plus 1/8, I'm going to add the numerator. 4 plus 1 is 5. And keep the denominator. And then 1 plus 1 is 2. So my final answer is negative 2 and 5/8. Right? They were both a negative, so my answer is negative, and I just added my mixed numbers. Number 3 says Malachi hikes for 2.5 miles and stops for lunch. Then he hikes for 1.5 more miles. How many miles did he hike all together? All right, so he's hiking 2.5 plus 1.5. So we're going to just add the 2 and the 1, get me a 3, and the 0.5s together get me 1 whole. So we get 4 miles all together. All right, now I want you to try numbers 1 through 3 on your own. Remember, they're the same sign, so you're going to add and keep the sign. All right, take a moment, check your answers with my answers. Number 2, when you add the fractions, you ended up with an improper fraction, so a numerator that's larger than the denominator. So we had 5/4, so we need to make it into a mixed number. So 4 goes into 5 one whole time with 1 out of 4 left over. So you have to remember how to make improper fractions mixed numbers. All right, let's now look at the additive inverse property. You may remember the additive inverse property from adding integers. Well, it applies when we add rational numbers as well. So the additive inverse property states that the sum of any number and its additive inverse or opposite is 0. Right? So any number plus its opposite is 0. So negative 3.5 plus 3.5 is 0. And then 3/4 plus negative 3/4, they're opposites, so they're going to be 0 as well. All right, so just understanding that the additive inverse property applies for rational numbers as well. Any number plus its opposite is 0. All right, let's now look at adding rational numbers with different signs. So some steps you can follow to add rational numbers with different signs is to subtract the numbers. and keep the sign of the largest number, and then simplify if necessary. So let's take a look at some examples. Number 1, we have negative 1.5 plus 5. So this time we have a negative and a positive. So our signs are different. So if you like to use the team strategy, we have positive team, the negative team. Positive team has 5 and negative team has 1.5. So who's winning? The positives, and by how much? So you're going to have to do 5 minus 1.5. So 5 minus 1 is 4. Minus the 0.5 will get us 3.5, right? And the positives are winning, so our answer is positive. Number 2, we have negative 3/4 plus 1/2. So again, we have a negative and a positive. So we have different signs. So we have 1/2 for the positives and then 3/4 for the negatives. So who's winning? The negatives, right? 3/4 is larger than 1/2. And by how much? So we're going to have to do 3/4 minus 1/2. Need to get more room for this. 3/4 minus 1/2. And I need to get a common denominator. So 4 and 2 have 4 in common. So I'm going to make this 3/4 minus 1/2 is the same as 2/4. Right, to get to 4, we're going to multiply by 2. 3/4 minus 2/4, 3 minus 2 is 1, and keep the denominator, so 1/4. So your final answer is negative 1/4. All right, the signs were different. My larger number was the negative, so my answer is negative, and then I just subtracted. Number 3 is a word problem. It says, during the day, the temperature increases by 4.5 degrees. At night, the temperature decreases by 7.5 degrees. What is the overall change in temperature? So we increased 4.5, so that's positive. And then we decreased by 7.5. So we have positive 4.5 and then negative 7.5. So our signs are different. So I'm going to write my positive and negative. Positives have 4.5, negatives have 7.5. So who's winning? The negative, so my answer will be negative. And by how much? So I'm going to subtract 7.5 minus 4.5. Well, 5 minus 5 is 0, and 7 minus 4 is 3. So 3.0 or 3. So our final answer is negative 3, and we are talking about temperature. So negative 3 degrees. The overall change in temperature was negative 3 degrees. All right, I want you to try numbers 1 through 3 on your own. All right, take a moment, pause the video if you need to, check your answers with my answers. And the last thing we're going to look at today is how to add multiple rational numbers. So when there's more than one rational number. So number 1 says negative 2.75 plus negative 3.25 plus 5. So I'm going to add my signs that are the same first, because when the signs are the same, we add and keep the sign. So I'm going to do 2.75 plus 3.25, so that's going to be 5 and then 6. And they were both negative, so my answer will be negative. And then I bring down the plus 5, negative 6 plus positive 5. The signs are different, right? I have positives and negatives. I got 5 positives, 6 negatives. So who's winning? The negatives. And by how much? 1. So negative 1. Number 2, we have 3 1/4 plus negative 2 plus negative 2 1/4. Again, I'm going to add the numbers with the same sign first, because when the signs are the same, we add. So I'm going to do 2 plus 2 1/4, which is 4 1/4. And they were both negative, so my answer is negative. And now I need to add that 3 1/4 that we haven't touched yet. So now we have negative 4 1/4 plus 3 1/4. Our signs are different, so we've got our positives and our negatives. 3 1/4 positives and 4 1/4 negatives. So who's winning? Our negatives, and by how much? So 4 1/4 minus 3 1/4. So you can write that out if you need to. So subtract your numerators because our denominators are already common. So 1 minus 1 is 0 out of 4, and then 4 minus 3 is 1. So 1 and 0 fourths, but if you have 0 out of 4, that's just 0. So your final answer is -1, right? -4 1/4 plus 3 1/4 is -1. All right, try number 1 and 2 on your own, and then hit continue to check your answers. All right, take a moment, check your answers with my answers. If you don't have any questions, you got it right and you feel good, and that's it for today's lesson. Have a good one.